there, welcome to our Peel Pride workshop. We are super excited to be here. We are from Canvas Action Arts Program. We're a nonprofit based in Toronto, and we do trainings on gender equity, consent, 2S LGBTQ plus inclusion in schools, in workplaces, in camps, and we've worked really extensively with the Peel District School Board. So we're super excited to be here celebrating Pride with Peel. Before we get started, we want to start with a land acknowledgement. Looks a little different because we're all virtually joining from different places, but Peel is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, the Attawandaron, and the Mississaugas of the Credit, and many, many nations recorded and unrecorded. It's super important for us to acknowledge the land that we're on because land is a meeting place and we are all virtually meeting, and it's important to take care of the land that we're on, acknowledge the Indigenous caretakers of the land and ways we can get involved and actually help change all the stuff that's going on currently. We are going to be doing a spoken word performance slash workshop. Spoken word is really important to me. I love it. It's my day job. It's what keeps me getting up every morning. And spoken word poetry is a form of oral storytelling that has originated with many, many Indigenous nations and many, many Indigenous folks across the world. You know, oral storytelling is a way of passing on knowledge, a way of passing on, legacy and heritage. And so we're super excited to be here to carry on that tradition. Awesome. Well, I'm going to get started first. We'll say bye to Vale and Sid for now, but they will be back. They will be sharing their stories and their wonderful poetry soon. So hello, I'm Robin. My pronouns are she, he, they, used interchangeably. I'm non-binary and queer. My background is I'm Punjabi, I'm Sikh, and I'm super excited to be doing poetry virtually with all of y'all because I grew up in Peel. I'm a Peel alumni. I love going back to Peel, to visiting my parents and in the place I grew up. So I'm super excited to be able to do stuff for Peel Pride, because when I was growing up in Brampton, I wasn't super full of pride. I was very ashamed of my identity, but I'm very glad that I've grown up and I've been able to come full circle, essentially. So I'm going to start us off with a poem. This is about being queer during COVID, during lockdown, during quarantine. So here it is. I'm going to bake, study, start up a business, get a 6-pack of abs, learn Spanish, clean my house, start learning how to make guacamole, and then I get off Twitter and realize I have no energy to carry out any of these COVID plans. Social isolation society tells me I need to be on a constant scheme and hustle cycle these days. I have a hard time believing in a 5-year plan when I do not know what tomorrow will look like. An absence of rent freezes leaves me out in the cold as my roommates and I have to give up our home. Means moving back in with my essential worker parents, back into the house I grew up in. These walls hold memories of high school I have spent years trying to forget. Kids can be cruel sometimes. So I've lived every day since as proud as I can be, but now I hide my queerness between the work lunches I pack for my parents. I hide every girl and woman between fresh shortbee. The fluidity in me solidifies and weighs me down. Am I queer if I keep responding to someone else's pronouns? The end of the world becomes erasure, and I know I have more immediate things to worry about, but I don't want my pandemic survivor story to be straightwashed. Queers in quarantine are having a hard time, and I can't even shave my head to cope. Last month, I hosted a queer poetry slam, and I had to lower my voice when my family walked by the door. I am not in the closet, just in this house that is not a home. I miss the unpacking in the arms of my queer friends. It's hard to clean out the house when I have a clutter of identities and secrets in my heart. Perfect, straight cis daughter doesn't know how to compartmentalize anymore. And I just don't have time to exercise or bake or hustle when I am just trying to survive a global pandemic and navigate childhood trauma tucked away in the corners of my old bedroom. I keep trying to remind myself that being alive is enough. Today, I got out of bed and that was enough. I reached out to my friends and that was enough. I cried and then drank a glass of water and that was enough. Today, I am enough, and tomorrow I will be too. Yeah, so being queer in quarantine is a weird time. It's definitely a weird time for all of us. I grew up in Brampton. I spent a lot of my life there. I didn't realize I was queer until the 8th grade when there was a girl who was sitting across from me in class, and I was like, wow, she's so pretty, she's so cute, I want to hold her hand. Wait, do I want to be her friend or do I want to date her? And growing up in a Punjabi household was not something, queerness was not something we ever talked about. So I ended up thinking that something was really wrong with me, right? I grew up in a time in Peel where we didn't really talk about queerness in our schools. It wasn't really a thing that was discussed. So it wasn't until the 9th grade when I finally was able to get on Google and research a bit about my identity that I found a word that fit, that felt like my favorite sweater. And that word was bisexual. I was attracted to people of all genders. High school started, I told my 2 best friends at the time, and they told everybody in my school. I was outed, and it was not a fun time. I got verbally bullied, physically bullied. People threatened to tell my parents that I was queer. It was really hard going for a really long time. It wasn't until the 10th grade where I was kind of adopted by a group of friends kind of my age and a little bit older who were all also queer as well, but not really out to the school because I was one of the first queer people who was out of the school and they had seen, all the discrimination and bullying I had faced. So we kind of kept our queerness to ourselves. It wasn't until we realized that this really sucked and that we wanted to be ourselves without fear of, fearing for our safety, fearing for, our rest of our high school experience. So we ended up creating a gay straight alliance. We called it the Gender and Sexuality Diversity Club. It became a safe space for us to just kind of hang out, talk about queer media, and then it turned into a big, beautiful group that did like events. We did Day of Pink events every year. We celebrated Pride Month, and it became a space where incoming grade 9s and younger kids could have a space to exist, a space to learn, a space to be proud about their queerness. And so I'm really thankful for the adults in my life who stepped up in my high school and created that space with us and let us be queer in peace. So yeah, growing up in Brampton and going back to Brampton definitely has, its pushes and pulls, right? It's a place where I love and I grew up, but also a place that wasn't super safe for me before. So yeah, I love traveling, not just back and forth between Brampton, but, other places. I've been able and very lucky to do that with my poetry career. And so this is another poem about that. Something about being young and queer means that I romanticize strangers a lot. I am almost rabid for love, not just romantic love, but also platonic. I look for love in almost everyone I meet. Like every interaction could be the beginning of a whirlwind friendship. Once in New Hampshire, someone and I realized we were born on the same day. I was so surprised I forgot to ask for their name and spent the rest of my night feeling like a fool. I think about how many of my soulmates live in cities I have never been to, hiding closets I will never be able to clean out, how many soulmates I have brushed past on the subway. My heart is missing something and I'm not quite sure what it is yet. I'm just waiting to meet all the people I'm going to love. Once in Manchester, someone exchanged ghost stories with me, and my head was so high up in the clouds with the specters that I told them they looked like an angel. Queer love is a divine thing. See how our feathers interlock with each other. My favorite memories are the hazy ones of strangers I have met along the way. Stuck to the nostalgia of what we could have been. Once in London, someone and I swam in a pond under a bridge. I did not hear when they asked to kiss me, and I laughed instead, kissed the gay frog, and I turned into tadpole, fresh, pure string, waiting to sprout queer under old bridge. I am trying to enjoy love while it lasts, even if it is for just a moment. For a brief interaction in an elevator, I keep writing about a forever love, but temporary love is important too. And I do not just mean romantic love, I mean platonic too. These platonic queer intimacies keep me alive. Once in Dallas, someone fixed my broken suitcase handle with their scarf. I bought them coffee as a thank you, and I was so amused the way they poured their sugar into their cup. I almost missed my flight home. Queer love is teeth-rottingly sweet. I have a cavity for every year I spent in the closet. And sometimes love can only stay for as long as it can. Sometimes you meet a love on the other side of a border, or a week before they fly back to school, or love is not ready for you, or love is not ready to name itself love. But when I see love again, I will say, thank you for being here. I will say, I'm glad my life brought me to you. I will say, please stay for as long as you can. Once I try to romanticize myself in the same way I do strangers. If anyone is deserving of my love, it is me, and I turn soft and lovely every time I get the chance to. I heal from everything I did not get an apology for. Every morning I wake up and forgive myself. I love love. That's the whole gist of who I am. I want to leave you with a couple poetry prompts before I introduce our wonderful next poet. Pandemic's been a wild time. How has the last year changed your experience of being queer? What have you missed out on? What have you gained? Who do you love? I want you to write an ode to the people you love. And yeah, I'm going to introduce Sid next, who is another wonderful, wonderful Canvas staff member and poet.
Thanks so much, Robin. What a brilliant poet Robin is. Oh, snaps, we snap to show our appreciation often in poetry. Robin taught me that. Robin taught me everything I know about poetry. I'm brand new to this realm, and I'm so excited to get to be here with you today. So like Robin said, my name is Sid. My pronouns are they and them. I am a social worker and a therapist, and I am brand new to poetry, and I'm so excited to share some poetry with you today. Before I jump right into my first poem, I want to give a content warning. I talk a lot about cancer in this poem, and I talk about the death of a family member. So if anyone would like to opt out of listening, I totally respect that. Take some time to do so. Yeah, and then I'll get started. So I'll just give you a moment. Okay. This poem is called Dear Mom, a Love Letter. My mother and I share the bond unique to only children of single parents. For my 18th birthday, I was gifted her power of attorney over medical decisions. After signing the required paperwork, my mother let out a breath she had been holding since my father died 13 years earlier. I watched creases of anxiety unfold from her face as she realized she had not left her child an orphan. The month after my father's brain tumor swallowed him whole, she found the lump in her breast. It was the end of the century, and threats of Y2K hadn't fazed my youthful parents, both feeling content with their PhDs and clever young child and fantastical dreams. For one whole month that last year of the millennium, my little family was happy. I don't remember January, but I do remember when my father started wailing, which led to the end of all he and my mother had built. For 8 months, he lived a half-life, having had a chunk of his brain excavated, and after a limited period of suffering, my mother dutifully called an end to his life support. He died in October, and by November it was my mother's turn. Month after month of cancer didn't end with him, couldn't end at all because there was a child. She tells me over and over that she lived for me. She took me to school every day and was never late for pickup. She gave up her hair for a wig we named Shaggy that later became part of a Harry Potter themed Halloween costume. She lay on the bathroom floor, body ravaged by chemo, and got up to read me a bedtime story. She spent no time at all grieving her great love, eyes pointed determinedly forward, because her family of two was still a family. Amidst it all, her breast was taken. My mother went under for a partial mastectomy and it ended radically, whole tissues and nodes discarded, large diagonal scar setting her body off balance, disrupting its delicate symmetry. No more nipple, reconstruction would increase the risk for recurrence and she wouldn't dare, not when there was a child who needed her. I spent the remainder of my childhood hearing about her mutilated body. Of course, she could never date again. Who would want her? The only loss my mother has let herself grieve is that of her breast, its absence more striking to her than my father's, her shame in it so total, her life fabricated around her image of herself as a deformed body. Her breast was taken from her so violently, so unexpectedly. How can I possibly tell her that I long to give mine up? Every trans memoir I've read starts in childhood, in knowing intrinsically that girl or boy doesn't fit, in feeling out of place through adolescence. This wasn't me. I didn't have gender expectations imposed on me in childhood. I was a girl, and that meant nothing much. I didn't question my gender until I looked into the mirror at age 25 and saw someone who might not be a woman looking back. Since then, it's been an ongoing journey towards gender euphoria. I dream that in my 30s I will finally feel at home in my body, but is that a myth? Now, when I look at myself, I ache. I have spent so long starving away my hips, but they are too solid, too strong to recede. I buy men's pants that get stuck before reaching my waist because of the curves never meant to fit them. No matter what I do, my body will not straighten. My breasts I can rehome, though. I can't call them a cancer. That word will never be a metaphor to me, but I am willing to let them grieve their lost body. I will button shirts up to my neck, and from the waist up, I'll look and feel like the same person. Seeing my reflection will no longer strike me. This year, my mother will be 20 years cancer-free. Her breast has yet to regrow. I wear a binder to flatten mine and feel almost free. I have yet to remove them permanently. What would my mother say if she knew it was a mastectomy that would help me stop feeling so homesick in myself? My mother's breast was torn from her. My breasts are healthy and whole. Don't we both need them gone to save our lives? Thanks everyone for listening. I invite you to take a deep breath if that felt heavy. I've learned that poetry is a way we can speak into the world things that we had no idea how to give words to otherwise. And I'm really grateful for that. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about who I am. Like I said, my name is Sid. Pronouns are they and them. I identify as queer and non-binary. I grew up in London, Ontario, and I probably realized I was queer when I was about 15, but starting at age 11 or 12, all my female friends seemed to have crushes on the boys in our class, so I pretended that I did too. I actually wrote in my journal about the boys I liked, until I could no longer pretend to myself. And that happened at around grade 9. I knew I was different, but I didn't yet have words to describe who I was. And this was largely because growing up, I didn't see myself represented by anyone in my life. I didn't know any queer women, and there wasn't anyone who was out in my grade in elementary, middle, or high school. It made me feel really lonely and confused. And even though I was a good student and had friends, I felt alone all the time. I developed depression and self-hate during this time. And then I tried to come out to a couple of people in grade 10, but I started to get bullied pretty badly for it, so I took it back and pretended I'd been kidding. At home, like I said in my poem, I was the only child of a single mom, and I was really afraid of disappointing her. My mom's side of the family is Lebanese, and in my experience of our culture, being queer isn't even spoken of. When I was 18, though, I moved away for university and I came out for real. For the first time, I experienced that coming out was not really a big deal. It was sort of anticlimactic. I would work myself up to it for like days and then come out to a friend and they'd be like, yeah, so what? You're Sid. We know you. We love you. What's for dinner? And people really started celebrating me for me. This was the time in my life that I started to build a chosen family. And what that means for folks who aren't familiar with the term is it's really the friends who I'll have in my life forever, the friends I call family. And that's huge to me. My chosen family is still huge to me. Like many other folks, my identity has shifted over the years. We can question at any time in our life. For me, it happened at age 25 when I thought I maybe might not be a woman. I started using they, them pronouns, and I'd really not ever felt more like myself. So that was hugely empowering for me. So I still identify as queer, also as non-binary, and I love these parts of myself. And my mom, who's one of the most important people in my life, knows about my queerness, loves my partner. She really surprised the heck out of me. Her love never wavered, even if it took some time to understand. And I really know that it's possible now for people in our lives to learn, to grow, surprise us. And I also know how incredibly lucky I am. So I think back to my high school self and I wish I could give young Sid a hug. Sometimes we hear adults saying you're not alone and it gets better, but it really takes experiencing these to believe it. sometimes when adults told me it gets better or you're not alone, I would actually be a little bit offended because I had never seen that that was possible. So I hope anyone watching this who sees themselves at all represented in my identities realizes that they aren't alone, and that there are adults who are thriving in these identities. My life is so awesome. So I am going to end things off with a short little final poem, and then I will pass things along. So this poem is after Tanisha Nicole. And when we say after, it means that I was inspired to write this based on this artist, Tanisha Nicole. Bless my breasts, heavy reminders of womanhood, even when I flatten them. Bless my hips, showing what my body was made for, and may one day birth the child I wish I could father. Bless baby Sid, born a woman, raised by a single woman, raised by a single woman, strength etched into my DNA. Bless my reflection, a picture I wish I could change until it mirrors my inner self. Bless my head, I cannot write about pain without writing about the brain that bears it. Bless my stretch marks, thank you for telling the story of how much I've grown. Bless my smile, the first thing the love of my life noticed about me. Bless my breath, catching when I see her and I can finally exhale. Thanks for having me today, Peel Pride. I'm so excited to pass things over to my colleague, Vale.
Hey. Thanks so much, Sid. I also want to give snaps to both you and Robin. I was like sitting here and be like, oh, I'm snapping so hard in my brain, but you can't see me. Oh, thank you everyone for having me. My name's Vale. They, them pronouns. I'm non-binary, I'm queer, I'm mixed race. I'm 30 and I grew up born and raised in Mississauga. I'm going to do two poems today, and I'm also going to talk a bit about growing up in Saga. This first poem is very short. It's called Ghost, and it's about my feelings towards my birth name and when I decided to choose a name for myself. After I came out as trans, of course, the name that I chose was Vale. So this is Ghost. This name was a gift, holding your love in 3 short syllables. It breathed me, shaped me, tethered me, bound me, breathed into new ears, tiny hands learning, painted onto my face 3 short syllables. This name was a stranger, living in my own mouth, my own body. This name is a ghost, another person spoken about, that girl who is me, who is secretly me, and not me, and no longer. I'm sorry. Thank you for listening. Yeah, that was a really short poem. I'm still kind of working on it, and maybe it'll expand over time. I'll talk a bit about growing up. Like I said, I was born and raised in Mississauga. I did not know anyone else who was mixed race in the same way as me. Even now as an adult, I get all excited whenever I meet another half Asian person. I kind of wanted to explore different gender expressions as I was growing up, but I didn't really know what that was called. I didn't have the words for it. And my mom was really set on me being at least somewhat feminine, and I just didn't have the courage to stand up for myself and what I wanted. I also didn't know anyone who was gender non-conforming except in the books that I was reading. And references to real life queer or trans people, they were disdainful or played for comedy or it was sensationalized. So I started hiding a lot and just not questioning anything. So I would hide the art that I made. I didn't reflect on my racial identity or what my Singaporean heritage meant for me. I didn't reflect on the crush that I had on one of my girlfriends in high school. And I hid the fact that I was depressed and anxious a lot of the time. Trying to be normal and to fit into these societal norms negatively affected my mental health, how I treated other people, my career path even, and my relationship with my family. But by a stroke of good luck, in my late teens, I was introduced to the word asexual, and then a whole lot of other queer identities all through, of course, the internet. So thanks to many, many people who I will never know their real names sharing their stories online, I got to finally question myself. That questioning came later for me than I think a lot of the queer people I know. I had 3 separate comings out with years in between. I came out as asexual around 16. I came out as bisexual when I was 20, 21. And then a few years later, I came out as non-binary when I was 24. Today, questioning is just a part of my regular life. I just accept it as part of the queer wonderfulness that I live every day. And I've grown so much because of the queer community. Meeting queer people, especially people of color, allowed me to question things, to come out of my shell, to make more art, to treat myself better, to treat others better. So I have a lot of gratitude for that. I also want to say I have a lot of gratitude in particular for a grassroots group that still exists in Mississauga. It's called QT BIPOC Saga, and I started attending their meetings in like 2016. They really welcomed me into such a warm and affirming community while I was still living in Mississauga and trying to figure out who I was as a person of color and who I was as an Asian person. I still think that like being queer is kind of about like art and change and beauty and fun. I'm really grateful to the people who came before me, the people that I'll never meet, that allowed me to learn about myself and about queer history in general. So now I kind of want to share with others that there is so much more to the world than just like heteronormativity, patriarchy, and capitalism. And so I wrote this poem for the queer kids or the questioning kids who might be listening. It is very much inspired by the poetry of my Canvas colleagues, Robin, Lonzo, and Tui. And so, yeah, I hope that they like it too. So this poem is called To the Queer Kids Who Will Hear This. Queerness is a state of wonder, sunlight over water, orchestra tuning as the curtains rise, our magic radiates like tiny fires, tiny stars. Queerness is a force of nature. We name ourselves after birds and the sky and our favorite colors because we see ourselves in the rhythm of timeless things, and we swear that our bodies will become holy places. I can tell you about love. Sitting together on New Year's Eve with our shoulders touching, walls covered with zines and chapbooks and art from our friends, sharing words from misplaced mother tongues and forgiving each other for not knowing more. Satchels of lavender, loose leaf tea made with roses, inviting you over for the leftovers I have in the fridge, showing you art I made in high school, late nights on the subway laughing a little too loudly, spending an afternoon drawing together, and walking side by side up Church Street, shaded by flags of blue and pink, and seeing people who could be our parents clapping for us. Queerness means they're gonna listen to us. Queerness as in, fuck you, get used to it, we're not dead yet. They can't police us, they can't divide us or define us because we are not alone anymore. And no matter how afraid we are, we speak truths to ourselves, breathing into the broken and twisted pieces, holding them together and deciding that they too can be called art. I can tell you about being queer. A cat's tentative nose, followed by a loving headbutt. Colored wigs and contacts in the summer. Fabulous fictions, alternate universes. Pink lighting, crowded chairs, and a single microphone on stage. Lipstick with bow ties. Children with enough fire inside to lift up a whole village. Queers love fiercely. We dream endlessly. And they should be scared of us. Their capitalist bullshit is stale, weak, rotting, stagnant. We are like the ocean undiscovered, the rivers shaping mountains, the wind carrying seeds to new places of home. Queers, we sing each other's glories and paint and praise ourselves. We touch the spaces inside us that have been hurt with the kind of tenderness that grows gardens. And we live. Thank you.
Awesome, awesome. Let's give some snaps for Vale, some snaps for Sid, some snaps for all of y'all watching. Poetry is beautiful, and poetry is great when it's listened to by other people as well. Want to leave you off with just a little advice, some of the best advice I've ever received or given about poetry. Anyone can poet. A poem is never done, and there is no right or wrong way to write a poem. Kind of the through line of our experiences and a lot of queers' experiences are, I didn't have the language growing up. I didn't have the language to explain who I was. And poetry is a way for you to have that language and to write about experiences that you maybe didn't have the language for when you were growing up, or now, or later, because questioning and queerness is an ever evolving, everybody does it at any point in their lives. And, having language is great. So I encourage you to write some poems inspired by some of our pieces, maybe inspired by some of your own experiences. Once again, we've been Canvas. Thank you for having us. Happy Pride.